Aloha, everybody. Welcome to the joint hearing between us and the esteemed Committee on Legislative Management. Thank you for my co-chair for being here. A couple of bills on the agenda. First up, we have House Bill 2005. Got it. 2005. First up, we have Robin Matsunaga, Office of the Ombudsman.
Thank you, aloha chairs and committee members. I submitted a kind of lengthy testimony. I will stand on that testimony, but just to summarize, again, I think the proposal to establish a whistleblower hotline has merit, but unless sufficient funding can be provided by office to implement that proposed hotline, it's going to severely impact my ability to continue to provide the services that I currently provide. At the last 12 months, we've received about 4,000 complaints. I only have, my office has 14 staff, 8 of which are analysts who handle and investigate those complaints. The bill as written would expand that jurisdiction to, besides state agencies, to private complaints against private companies as well. So that's kind of what my testimony was trying to convey. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Oops, sorry, it's on me. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, there's an echo on this. Okay, thank you very much, Robin. Appreciate it. That's all we have on House Bill 2005. Anybody else wish to testify on Zoom? Seeing none, members, questions of Robin? Seeing none, quick question for you, Robin. What would be your need, both in, I guess, the amount of money and the FTEs that you would need to carry this out should this bill go forward to the governor's office?
It's hard for me to answer that question at this time because I'm not aware of how many whistleblower type complaints that qualify under the definition that you provided in the bill. There are. Also, my concern is that a lot of individuals don't understand the difference between a whistleblower type of complaint versus a complaint against an employer that involves only personal grievances. So we tend to get a lot of those kind of complaints, and we're aware of them. We even receive some that are against private organizations right now that we tell them we don't have jurisdiction to investigate under the current law. So I'd be able to get you some numbers later if I was able to do, after doing some research on, with Department of Labor to see if they have any statistics on whistleblower complaint numbers. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Robin. Appreciate it. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next bill on the agenda, 2419, Les Kondo, State Auditor.
Good morning. I'm Les Kondo. I'm the state auditor. We submitted detailed testimony in opposition that I hope members read and consider. This bill and the next one, HB 2420, are products of the House Investigative Committee that was established to follow up on the audits issued by my office relating to the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Special Land and Development Fund, and the Agribusiness Development Corporation. Very simply, these bills will hurt our ability to do our job. HB 2419, which is this bill, would create exceptions to section 23-9.5, the statute that currently guarantees without exception the confidentiality of the auditor's working papers. Confidentiality of our working papers is critical. The legislature recognized as much when it amended the law to protect those working papers, and I quote, "The scope and nature of the duties and responsibilities imposed upon the auditor are of such critical importance to the state that the auditor's working papers should be kept confidential, and that subjecting the auditor's working papers to disclosure requirements would seriously impair the auditor's ability to fulfill mandated responsibilities and to discharge statutory duties." And Hawaii is not alone in protecting the confidentiality of all its auditors' working papers. The majority of other state auditor offices also consider working papers to be confidential. The confidentiality of our working papers creates a safe harbor for employees of state agencies that enable them to speak candidly about agency problems or issues without the fear of retaliation or retribution by others within the agency. Employee candor is essential to our job. Eliminating that safe harbor will have a predictable and significant chilling effect on the candor of employees, on agency employees. Agency employees will not readily report issues, problems, or dysfunctions within their agencies, much less fraud, waste, and abuse, if they fear adverse consequences in their employment for doing so. Comprehensive confidentiality of our working papers protects them. Lack of comprehensive confidentiality does not. My office is a valuable resource for the legislature. We assess the performance of state programs. These are programs established and funded by the legislature. We assess whether these programs are achieving their statutory purpose and doing so effectively and efficiently. We must be able to do our job without political or external interference. In short, this bill will impede our ability to do that job. Respectfully, it is not good policy and should be held. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my comments.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your testimony in opposition. That's all we've received on 2419. Is there anybody else on Zoom who would like to testify? Seeing none, we'll move on to, oh, wait, let's do questions first, I guess, on each bill. Members, are there any questions on this measure particularly? Rep. Bellotti on 2419.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at auditor's testimony, and he has a line in there that says the majority of other state auditor offices also consider all working papers to be confidential. He then cites to Auditing in the States, a summary, National Association of State Auditors. Would it be possible, Auditor, if we can get a copy of that summary? I've been trying to locate that and it appears that it might not be available. And then based on that summary, it appears that there are places and that employ the practice of allowing certain working papers to be made available to other governmental agencies. Can you comment on what other states do allow that practice?
I can't, because I'm not familiar with those organizations, their purpose, how they may be different from our purpose, their statutory mandate. I know that you and the committee have cited GAO, and their operations are very different from our operations and our mandate. So I think that it's apples to oranges comparison, but I'm not able to answer your question because I haven't done that analysis or that research.
Okay, so if you could provide the committee, because I think as we continue to work on this measure moving forward, and we may not, really be able to research it and finalize anything, I would be interested in this citation that you have, because in our research, we have found that there are other states that allow some limited availability of working papers. And then my second question, Auditor Kondo, is, you speak to the legislative history of the statute. Are you aware that prior to the passage of this statute, the Office of the Auditor's Office did in fact allow working papers available to the public after the issuance of the reports, and that actually had been a standard practice prior to the enactment of the statute?
Yeah, I'm aware of that because unless there's a provision like 23-9.5, all records held by any state agency, including my office, are subject to disclosure under the Uniform Information Practices Act, which is our version of the Federal Freedom of Information Act. So
okay,
absent a confidentiality statute, for sure, one of the exceptions, you'd have to find an exception that applied to protect those documents. And once the report is finished, then certainly without the confidentiality statute, it's likely those documents would be subject to public disclosure. So if that answers your question, yeah, I'm aware of that. And that's the rationale.
So so Auditor Kondo, thank you, Chair, for indulging me in these questions. I just want to make sure that, that the committees understand that in the auditing world, and like when we look at the statutory frameworks around auditing agencies, whether around other states, our own state, or the federal government, that there are in fact limited exceptions for very important reasons so that the legislature itself can conduct its investigative work. And so that what we're asking for in here is actually not outside of the norm, but it is consistent with other practices in other states and in fact with the federal government. Thank you, Chair, for indulging in my questions.
Chair, can I respond to that? Because that is untrue.
Okay, whoa, this isn't a debate, okay?
Okay, well-
Question and answers, thank you, sir. I mean, if you want to have a discussion with the representative offline or other parties, feel free to do so, but for right now, because I have a couple questions I want to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
PII, is your concern with PII?
What is PII, sir?
Personal identifying information, PII, because the system, what Congress has run into this before with the military and OMB, and they've come up with a redaction system where PII is redacted from papers that are turned over to Congress in the furtherance of their role of ensuring public disclosure and transparency in the internal workings of different entities. Would such a system work insofar as being able to turn over papers to provide them while still protecting the PII, as you had alluded to in your testimony?
I think the answer is a little more complicated than just being able to say yes or no, but I think my general response would probably be no. Many agencies, I mean, we don't talk to every employee in every department in every agency. We talk to a relatively small number of folks, a couple handfuls, 10, 20, whatever it may be. And if we are reporting in our work paper, summarizing interviews, for instance, and we redact the person's name or redact the person's position, and that document is somehow disclosed publicly or to the agency or even to the legislature, it's very unlikely that that person's identity is absolutely protected. I want to make another comment because I'm concerned that this bill is to allow an investigative committee access to our work papers. And I disagree with what Representative Bellotti represented to you folks about the breadth of other state audit organizations and the access to their work papers. I don't believe that's true, but putting that aside, I guess the big question I would ask, because this obviously is coming out of her working group, her investigative committee.
Okay, we're not here to imbibe motive. Okay, let's get back to PII. PII isn't just names and positions. It's any information that one could reasonably use to identify a person or entity and disclose their personal information. So given that, I mean, we have this redaction process in Congress for the military and dealing with them because what they do is very important to both them and the public. Isn't such a system, couldn't it be adopted through this measure, through an amended measure to allow for limited disclosure that would protect the PII, but yet create a mechanism for the legislature to review different kinds of things that are going on insofar as the investigative process goes? That's all.
I think the question, like I said earlier, it's a lot more complicated than perhaps the committee or you're asking, because working papers is not just interview notes. It's our own internal, notes and documents and memoranda. There's a lot of stuff in there that really would also chill our own ability to do our work. It chills, I talked about chilling, the chilling effect that this will have on information that is provided to us by employees who are interviewing or other people who we are interviewing outside of the auditee to try to get information for purposes of our audit. It also will allow access to our own internal documents. Some of that mental, the mental impressions and those type of things as we summarize documents, as we analyze documents, and that will also have a chilling effect on my own guys. Why are we going to document things that later on someone is going to open up and start criticizing us for? And that's another protection under the Uniform Information Practices Act, and that's for that exact reason. So it doesn't chill agency discussion. It doesn't chill employees' abilities to document things. And that's what this statute will do. It will chill not only the ability for auditees and their employees and staff to give us information, it will chill our own staff's ability to put things down in writing. And I want to tell you guys, if you think that when we talk to auditees that they don't point fingers to the legislature, you're mistaken. Often we'll get people saying, we don't get funding, we don't get enough staff. There's legislative challenges
that's been very public knowledge. You put it in their testimony all the time. We know that. Okay.
Okay. Well,
that's an axe that's been grinded for years before I was here and probably years after I'm gone. So, I mean, it's But I mean, criticism of the public against the legislature is part and parcel of the legislative process and being a legislator. So, I appreciate your thoughts on that, but I don't think that's
Chair, will you let the witness testify, please? Let the witness testify without interrupting, please.
Representative Ward, we're in question and answer period, and I'm having question and answer. The testimony period is over. Okay, we clear?
But
Thank
okay,
you.
let me revise it. When he's answering a question, don't interrupt him.
You know what? I will conduct the hearing the way I see fit. Representative Ward, I'm responding to his question in real time, and I'll thank you to remember that. So if you don't mind, I'd like to continue my discussion with the auditor because it's a good one and one that needs to be had. Okay.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So again, Mr. Kondo, before we move on to the next bill, I guess, I understand the chilling effect, but I guess the question I want to leave you with now is, surely there is a way to create a process through this bill to meet the aims for public transparency in a way that doesn't chill the very minute internal working documents of the agency.
I think you're mistaken that this bill provides public transparency, because that's not my understanding of what this bill is doing. It's providing transparency only to an investigative committee.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, I appreciate your concerns. Okay. Can we take a short recess? I've had a request for a recess from one of the members. So we're going to take a brief recess before we move on to 2420. Is that okay, Co-Chair Kobayashi? And then we can pick it up with questions you may have. You're on mute.
If we're gonna have a discussion during the recess, I'm coming in remotely. So I wonder if we could do like a breakout room for whatever we're gonna discuss during this recess, because I'm not physically present.
No. Listen, I think we're just taking a brief recess because one of the members, I think, has to run out the door real quick. We're not going to discuss anything. If we do, we'll do a breakout. Okay. We're just taking a recess. We'll be right back. There'll be no offline discussions at all. Okay. Brief recess. Okay. Back again. Okay. Sorry about that. Just a question from a committee member about making sure that they're here for the vote if we take one. Okay, Rep Kobayashi, sorry, co-chair, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just have, going back to questions on the 2419. I have a question for Mr. Kondo, just to follow up. I was interested in some of your opinions on the subject that was originally brought up as far as the states that do allow working papers to be used by the investigative committee and those that don't. And you started elaborating on that. And, you know, what your opinion was as to, I guess the statement was made as to that being the basis for saying, yeah, you should be turning over the working papers. And you started making comments as to your opinions on that relative to states that don't allow it. And yeah, I'm just interested to hear you follow through on that particular discussion, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, I'm really not, I didn't do a survey. We pulled the information off of something that was given to us or distributed to us through one of the national organizations. I don't know if it's NCSL or one of those other organizations, but like I responded to Representative Bellotti, I have not done any kind of, sorry, I hear feedback. But I have not done any kind of research to go state by state to understand what their laws are and the scope of their state auditor's mandate. But certainly, I would expect the states that do protect their auditor working papers, that make them confidential, it is for the exact reason that I'm testifying here, that it is important to be able to get candid information, full and complete information from auditees, for us to be able to do our job, to provide you folks, we're a resource for the legislature, to provide you folks with as thorough assessment as possible. We need to be able to get complete and unfiltered information from people that we talk to. So I would imagine that is exactly why those states that protect auditor working papers do that, to prevent that chilling effect, to ensure that they get complete and unfiltered information for purposes of their audits.
Thank you. So also, it was brought up that there was never a law here protecting auditor working papers prior to this that you had commented on. And I kind of missed a lot of the last part of what you said. Some technical issues here remotely, but was there something about why, your opinion on why that would have been the case, and that it was really a general freedom of information issue, or rather than a specific statute related to you should have to turn over working papers?
Sure.
What's the background there, if you could elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I get to put on a hat that I haven't worn in 15 years because I used to be director at Office of Information Practices that oversees the UIPA many moons ago. And my recollection of that experience is that any record a government agency holds or maintains, that it is subject to public disclosure unless there is an exception in the statute, and there's only 5 of them under 92F 13, 5 exceptions that allow an agency to withhold a document from public disclosure upon a request from the public. And without a confidentiality statute, it's very likely that once the audit is done, none of those exceptions apply to the document or the working papers. And therefore, upon a public records request, the agency is required, mandated, to provide those documents to the public or the person that made the request. So the confidentiality statute 23-9.5, it guarantees that that won't happen. It guarantees that the information that we've gathered, our mental impressions, as well as the information provided to us by the auditees, the people that we interviewed, that it will be protected from disclosure, period. It's a guarantee, so we don't worry about, or they don't worry about, subsequent disclosure of information. Whether it's disclosed before the audit or after the audit, frankly, it probably doesn't matter if there's information that they wouldn't want to be shared. So the confidentiality provision, it protects that information. So people don't worry that subsequently it's going to come out and there's going to be some retribution by people that read that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Co-Chair. All right, lively discussion. Let's move on to the next bill on the agenda. House Bill 2420, first up, Les Condos, State Auditor.
Okay, thank you again for hearing my testimony. We again submitted detailed written testimony in opposition, and I again urge members to read and consider it. As I mentioned in my testimony about the prior bill, HB 2419, this bill was introduced by the House Investigative Committee that was established to follow up on our audits relating to the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Special Land and Development Fund, and the Agribusiness Development Corporation. And like the prior bill, this bill is unnecessary and of greater concern, will hinder our ability to do our job. HB 2420 proposes 2 sections. The first section would require the auditor to provide an audited agency with a draft audit report that includes the auditor's finding and recommendations at least 30 days before an exit conference is conducted. Nothing in the government auditing standards promulgated by the U.S. Comptroller General dictates how much time auditors must give to auditees to review draft reports. So it's unclear what auditing practices and standards the bill is drawing on when imposing this new standard. That requirement will add an element of inflexibility and delay to an already complex process without any corresponding benefit. It would unnecessarily compress the time frame for audit planning, field work, analysis, and drafting reports. It would also delay reporting time-sensitive information to the legislature. As a practical matter, we accommodate reasonable requests for extensions of time. In the case of ADC, which the investigative committee uses as its reason for the proposed amendment, the executive director, his executive assistant, or anyone else never asked for additional time to respond to the draft report. If ADC needed more time to review and respond to the draft report, that was never conveyed to us. And if they did need more time, we would have tried to accommodate the request, assuming it was reasonable. As for the requirement that we include recommendations in the draft report provided to agencies, we also note that it is not required under the government auditing standards. In accordance with the government auditing standards application guidance, the drafts we send to agencies for review contain complete findings. That is most efficient and helpful. Agencies should focus on the findings in the draft reports, and more specifically, the causes of the issues that we found. That gives an agency a chance to spot what they think may be an inaccuracy prior to the final report. ADC is a case in point. ADC and its board seem fixated on the recommendations, just the recommendations. Those recommendations, however, are our suggestions about how to improve ADC's operations. ADC should be focusing on and trying to address the root causes of the issue that we found. If they have a different way to address those causes, that's fine. Our suggestion, our recommendations are just that, suggestions. And of course, the agencies are always free to comment on the recommendations when at a later stage, the agency responds to our follow-up, in which we solicit their input on whether they implemented our recommendations, and if not, why not. The bill also proposes a section on testimonial evidence and recordings that would require us to, among other things, follow best auditing practices and standards when obtaining testimonial evidence and provide individuals with a copy of any recorded interview. Once again, it's not clear which best auditing practices and standards the bill is referring to regarding obtaining testimonial evidence. Government auditing standards do not prohibit or discourage recording of interviews. As confirmed by our peer reviews, our work is consistent with those government auditing standards. We make audio recordings of interviews as a standard practice to ensure that the testimonial evidence we report is accurate and in context. The recordings allow us to check the accuracy of our notes that we take during these interviews. Not only does it serve the auditing goals of rigorous accuracy, it also saves agency personnel valuable time and energy. The recordings, we don't need to follow up and ask additional questions of interviewees to confirm the accuracy of our interview notes. It gives the agency interviewees, the folks that we talk to, the assurance that any quotations are accurate and in context. Requiring interview recordings to be provided to people outside of our office will also have the opposite result intended and will result in discouraging open and frank answers. Only the recordings made by my office, by my auditors, are unquestionably protected from disclosure by our comprehensive confidentiality statute that we talked about just a second ago, Section 23-9.5. Providing our recordings to audited agencies or individual employees may make the recordings public records, subject to disclosure under the Uniform Information Practices Act. Both sections of the proposed bill impose requirements that will hinder the audit process, not help it. Similar to what I said with respect to the prior bill, this bill is not good policy. It will impede our ability to do our job, that is to obtain unfiltered information about state programs we are auditing, and it should be held. Thank you very much for the opportunity to offer my testimony.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. That's all we have on 2420. Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to testify? Seeing none, members, questions of Mr. Kondo on this measure, 2420. Representative Ward on 2420, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kondo, every 3 years, we understand that you are audited or you're given peer review audits. How many of those have you gone through?
During my tenure, we've gone through two.
Two. Are any of the issues that we're talking about in the previous bill or this bill ever brought up as something that should be attended to or was flagged?
No. I think that these bills, like I talked about a little earlier with respect to 2419 and also this bill, these are unusual measures to get access into our process in our work. So it's not common in other audit shops. And, it's certainly, like I just testified with respect to 2420, it certainly is not things that are required under the government auditing standards. So that's what we're being peer reviewed on, our compliance with those government auditing standards.
But then that raises the question, how solid is your constitutional guarantee of impartiality? Does it kind of pierce that shield a bit? Or, I mean, if these things become public and then the variable of political intervention, how impartial can you be with these two bills?
I think that's a concern, an overarching concern that we've had from, a year ago or whatever it's been when we've seen other attempts to exert some influence over my office. We need to be independent and we need to be objective. That's required not only by the constitutional provision, by the statute, by government auditing standards, but just generally so that we can do our work. Our job is supposed to provide these independent assessments of these agencies. We're not doing, we're not the hatchet job or the hatchet guy to do what the legislature or somebody else is dictating us to do. We're supposed to provide independent assessments, things that are objective and unbiased. That's our job, and that's what we're trying to do. Yet your comment is well taken, because it's hard to do that when there are tentacles of the legislature or others that are starting to creep into our business, our work, how we perform our work.
So, Mr. Kondo, how do we fix the situation? Do we just back off, or is there a piece of legislation that you would say amend this one, or do a different one, or just say, look, let me do my job, full stop?
I don't think that we are immune from review. I think that we, just like any other government agency or government employee, we are subject to making sure that we are accountable. One way that the legislature gets that assurance is through our peer reviews. We are a yellow book shop, meaning we follow the government auditing standards. So every 3 years, like you mentioned, Representative Ward, we have other state auditors from other jurisdictions. They come here and they spend a week looking through our reports, selected reports, and our work papers to ensure that we are following those government auditing standards. That's a national standard that is promulgated by the U.S. Comptroller General. So that should give assurance to the legislature and others that we are doing the work the way that we are supposed to be doing our work. If the legislature or others have questions about our work, we're always here to answer them, to provide information about our reports, about our process. And we tried to do that in the most recent investigative committee hearings. But anyway, we should be held accountable, and there should be other processes, but this is not it. This way to get into our work papers, to interfere with our process, it's unnecessary, and really it will impede or hinder our ability to do our job. And it's really an important function to hold agencies accountable, to provide the transparency that's necessary for many of these programs that unfortunately you folks and others just don't get the time to be able to see what they're doing and how they're performing.
Thank you, Mr. Gondo. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Representative. Thank you for your questions. Rep. Bellotti, I believe you have questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that commentary on the confidentiality again, but I want to bring it back to House Bill 2420 that's actually focused on auditing practices. Auditor Kondo, in your testimony, you state, as for the requirement that we include recommendations in the draft report provided to agencies, we note that this is not required under government auditing standards. You then cite to 9.54 of the Yellow Book standards of the 2018 standards, and you cite to language in that standard that says providing a draft report with findings for review. Mr. Kondo, as I read this requirement under the government auditing standards, you exclude, however, the language that says, including the views of responsible officials, results in a report that presents not only the auditor's findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So that standard, in fact, does contemplate that you provide the recommendations to the audited agencies if you have them. Is that correct?
Representative, I don't agree with you. And okay. I would suggest to you that when people that do this as a living, the professional auditors, the other state auditors, when they come and look at our work, when they peer review us, they don't read that section the way that you are reading that section.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that we have a disagreement, Auditor Kondo, but I'm focusing on your testimony that cites and says that the government auditing standards don't refer to providing recommendations at all. I want to point you out to requirements 9.50, 9.52 that say requirements, obtaining the views of responsible officials. The government auditing standards say auditors should obtain and report the views of responsible officials of the audited entity, including concerning, the findings, conclusions, and recommendations. And then 9.52 also says, when the audited entity's comments are inconsistent or in conflict with the findings, conclusions, or recommendations, in the draft report, the auditor should evaluate the validity of the audited entity's comments. So my question to you, Mr. Kondo, based on these government auditing standards that are in black and white, expelled out explicitly in the Yellow Book standards and boxed and said requirements, it does in fact say that recommendations should be shared with the audited agencies in the draft report. Is that correct?
No, it's not, Representative. You are
Okay,
not.
I think we have a disagreement. So
Okay,
I will share these standards with the committee members, but I understand that we have a disagreement. Thank you, Mr. Kondo.
Thank you. Co-Chair Kobayashi, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think that is really at the heart of one of the three items mentioned in 2420 of significance that I'd really like to hear you elaborate on your opinion on the last question, if you could.
I think I've said my opinion. I mean, I can go through and we can debate what the Yellow Book says and what it doesn't say. And, you know,
what do you think it says? What do you think? What is your interpretation of that particular clause?
Well, it doesn't require us to provide, the Yellow Book does not require us to provide recommendations to the auditee. It requires us to provide the findings, a complete report with complete findings to the auditee. Representative Bellotti seems to be cherry picking certain provisions, but like I keep saying, the mediator, so to speak, the independent voice on this issue is peer review. The peer review folks who are state auditors that do this for a living, just like me in my office, not people that are reading this book for the first time and trying to tell us how it should be interpreted. These are people that do this for a living, and they are not raising any issue, any concern about the draft reports that we are giving auditees. And like I mentioned earlier, the real focus for the auditee should be on the audit findings. Those are the issues that we've identified. And even more specifically, it's not the findings. The findings are composed of a number of elements. One of those elements is, what's the cause? Why is this happening? That's what the auditee needs to be focused on so that we can have a discussion about whether or not we are in agreement that that is what's causing these problems that we're reporting. And that is what really needs to be addressed as we try to fix this agency, try to improve this agency. So, you know, like I mentioned, ADC, they got all caught up and continue to be all caught up just on recommendations, ignoring the findings, ignoring the causes that we've identified. That to me is just, you know, focusing on the tree and not the forest kind of thing. We need to help these agencies improve. And the way to do that is focusing on the findings with them, not recommendations, which are just our opinion as to how the agency should improve its operations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from any members who haven't asked them yet? If not, last chance for any follow-up questions. Okay, if not, we'll recess briefly the joint hearing with LMG. We'll be back. Okay, reconvening the Joint Committees on Government Reform and Legislative Management. After conferring with my illustrious co-chair, what we're going to do, first bill, House Bill 2005. I appreciate your members' support and indulgence in hearing this, but as you heard from the testimony of the ombudsman, if we were to give him expanded whistleblower duties as the bill envisions, we would probably need to give him extra resources which are not reflected in the supplemental budget, and would probably need the concurrence and the input of DLIR, which would probably trigger a re-referral to yet another committee. So let's work with him on the off session on this idea so we can maybe bring it back next year and come up with something that can be really thorough and robust. As to House Bill 2419 and House Bill 2420, after conferring with my co-chair, we're going to defer these measures time certain to next week so we can discuss them between us as well as with the committee members. So we will post in advance when the reconvene for decision-making will be. But again, for 24-19 and 24-20, it is deferral time certain. And we'll come back on DM on those measures later. Okay, members, thanks for being here today. I know you're busy. I'll let you get on with everything else. Happy Aloha Friday.
What you do next?
Okay, back again, this time for us and us alone. We have House Bill 1908 up. First up, State Procurement Office.
Good morning, chairs, vice chairs, Bonnie Kahakui for the State Procurement Office. We stand on our written testimony in opposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We have Neil Arita, Legislative Committee Chair, Contractors Licensing Board. Written with comments requesting amendments. Next up, Terry Guerin, Director of the Financial Services Department Judiciary, State of Hawaii. Not there. Okay, we have written comments as well. Kurt Odagura, Comptroller of DAGS.
Morning, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Kurt Otaguro, State Comptroller, Department of Accounting and General Services stands on its written testimony in opposition of the measure. We're happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Appreciate you being here and your testimony. Christine Kinamaka of DAGS as well.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. I'm here to support our comptroller to answer any questions if there are any. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony with opposition. We have Andrew Kawano, Director of the City and County of Honolulu, the Budget and Fiscal Services Division. Okay, not here. In opposition, Greg Sirikaku, Executive Director of PAMCA. Okay, and they are going ahead and they are requesting a sunset date in the measure. Tim Lyons, President of the Subcontractors Association of Hawaii.
Yes, Chairman. How are you today?
Doing good. How are you doing, sir?
Great. We've submitted our written testimony. We just want the committee to be aware that you likely are, that this has been a controversial matter for a number of years. This bill tends to work towards a solution of what the general contractors say is an insufficient time to put their bids together with accuracy. We're not sure we subscribe to that theory. However, with the parameters that are specified in this bill and in the spirit of cooperation, we can support the intent. We do ask for two things, however. One is just a minor stylistic change, is that an inversion of the language. It doesn't change anything per se, but it does make it a lot clearer. And secondly, we would also request a 2-year sunset clause. This bill and the way it works is extremely important financially to subcontractors. We enter this with caution and would prefer to see a 2-year trial period of this going on. And then, so therefore a sunset clause we think would be in order. Other than that, you have our written testimony and we appreciate the opportunity to testify before you.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you being here. Next up, we have Ryan Sakuda with the General Contractors Association of Hawaii.
Hello, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Wildberger, members of the committee. The GCA would just like to add some comments that is not in our written testimony. So the purpose of this bill is to attempt to reduce the number of bid protests regarding subcontractor listing. One agency described the scene at bid opening as general contractors will examine the subcontractor listing of bidders who submitted lower price bids, and then they'll photograph those listings. They'll then go to the professional vocational licensing websites. They'll check the licensing information for those subs with the hope of finding technical flaws to protest them on. The GCA and Subcontractors Association have finally compromised on a model that we believe has the potential to reduce these mistakes and protests. I think all the stakeholders can agree that the sublist requirements is the #1 source of bid protest. The general contractors look at the California's procurement code as the model, and this is exactly what they've implemented. This is also a recommendation that was given to the State Procurement Office by an independent study. So to appease any concerns, we are open to the suggested sunset of 2 years as well.
Great, thank you. You answered my question for me already. Jeff Matsuuga, painters, tapers, glaziers, carpet layers, stabilization fund.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Jeff Masatsugu, and I represent 4 labor management cooperation funds. Those are the ones that the Chair just mentioned, the painters, tapers, glazers, and floor layers. Chair, we're opposed to this measure. I want to state one thing first, is that we strongly disagree with the introduction part of this bill and some of the comments from GCA that subcontractor listing is a significant problem, is a significant source of bid protests. You know, I was part of a task force that was formed a number of years ago to investigate this. And in that investigation, you know, we gathered data and information. It was actually GCA that gathered this data and information. And when it was analyzed, the data, protest data from certain agencies over a 2-year period, what we found was that the increase in costs to the agencies were statistically insignificant. They were a fraction of 1% of the total project. So I think it's a misconception that there's a problem, that subcontractor listing is a problem that causes delays and increased costs in construction. It doesn't. And you know, I've attached in my written testimony a link to the report from the task force. And I would urge all of the members of the committee to please read that report, especially the section on subcontractor listing. You know, our opposition with this measure in 1908 is that it's completely unnecessary. You know, what you're doing is adding language which already exists in the statute into another section. So the result is you're going to have basically the same language in 2 separate sections. And, you know, it's just going to cause unnecessary confusion and chaos. And we think it could potentially create even more bid protests because there's 2 separate sections. If I could make an analogy, it's like saying we need to pass a bill to make it a felony to stab someone to death. Well, no, you don't. There's already laws on the books that cover that. It's the same situation here. If you look at HRS 103D-302G, as in golf, you'll see that it's doing the same thing that this measure wants to do. 302G allows changes to a bid before or after it's opened. And, you know, quite frankly, there's just no need for this. Quite frankly, we see this as an attempt to get a foot in the door to try and repeal the subcontractor listing provisions of the procurement code. That's a bad thing because that provides transparency and fairness in the bidding process, fairness to specialty contractors. So for all those reasons, Chair, we respectfully ask you and the committee to defer this measure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We have late testimony from Director Jay Butai, Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there he is.
My name is Patrick McCain. I'm the Deputy Director at the Department of Transportation. And we would like to stand on our written testimony. Thank you, sir.
Okay, with comments and requesting amendments. Okay. That's all we have, late and otherwise, on 1908. Is there anybody on Zoom who'd like to testify who I may have not called? Seeing none, members, are there questions of any of the testifiers? If not, I have a quick question for Mr. Sakuda. Mr. Sakuda, I'd like you to respond to Mr. Masatuga's testimony, in particular, the conflict that may exist between the 2 different sections.
Okay, if you guys could look actually at a 2020 report that was given to the legislature, I think it's cited in my testimony. It refutes the 2013 task force. It says a common theme among subcontractors interviewed was that the task force report proved that the subcontractor listing requirement did not drive protests. They anecdotally referenced a 1% figure from the report as evidence of this concept. They referenced the 1% figure referred to the frequency of projects where the low bidding vendor was replaced due to a subcontractor listing problem. Thus, what this 1% figure instead proves is that the protests are not frequently successful. So if anything, this is evidence that the subcontractor listing requirement poses an especially high risk of unnecessary protests. This was a report that was given to the SPO and legislature last year, 2020. And in regards to the fact that there is language that already exists, currently there is in 103D and in the admin rules that allows the change upon the determination of the procurement officer of each department. So in that sense, it's discretionary, where they can choose which ones they are going to allow to have amendments for technical issues. We just want to give ourselves the chance to do it within 24 hours to prevent any kind of bid protest that might happen before that kind of issue occurs. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Matsusu, sorry if I'm not mispronouncing your name. A rebuttal, if you like, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. As to the first, I'd like to respond to the first item that was brought up by GCA, which is a 2020 report. And what GCA is referring to is a report that was prepared by ICASO, which is a third-party firm that was retained by the SPO to do some investigating into the subcontractor listing issue. This was done this report was requested by SPO as a result of a request for information. I believe it was in a resolution. I can't recall offhand if it was a resolution or statute that was passed asking SPO to do an investigation. But I think the important thing to remember is that the ICASO report and the state task force report they have they're looking at different things, or I'm citing to the task force report for something different than the ICASO report, because the task force report looked at, okay, what did the bid protests cost the agencies in terms of a dollar value? And that, as far as I know, that was not challenged by the ICASO report. So again, the findings from the state task force, and again, those findings were based on data that was gathered by the GCA in conjunction with certain procurement agencies over a 2-year period. Again, those findings were that the change in dollar value, the increase in dollar value because of subcontractor listing, or more accurately, bid protests related to subcontractor listing, were statistically insignificant. So we're sort of talking about two different things when we talk about those two different reports. What we're trying to say is it's not a problem because it has not increased costs significantly.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, as to the second issue that GCA brings up, it's not clear why GCA wouldn't just go in and amend HRS 103D 302G instead of adding an entirely new section to the code. You're adding the same language that's in G into subsection A. So you're going to have two sections with this same language. And we feel that's going to be a source of confusion and could potentially result in challenges and a lawsuit.
Mr. Sakuda, are you still there?
Yeah.
Do you want to respond to the counterpoint made by the previous testifier as far as amending 103D?
Yeah, so what we're trying to say is that the subcontractor listing is a problem because of the fact that it's the source of the number one amount of protests filed. I believe the report says 45% of all protests.
Not the report part, but on the amending 103D.
Oh, yeah. So the reason why we're doing it this way is because everyone can see that the California Procurement Code statute, where they allow the 24 hours, works. And so we wanted to just model after that, so we can get compromise amongst the stakeholders rather than just pull some kind of thing out of left field. And the reason, we're open to any kind of amendments that contain these parameters that we have in there, if that's what they want to do. But please, we would have to see the language first.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony and the discussion on this issue. Okay, let's go on and move on to the next one, which is House Bill 1974. Craig Harai, Director of Budget and Finance. Written testimony with comments. We have Cara Jabola Carolis, Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women. Written in support, we have Jay Batai, Department of Transportation.
Yes, sir. Patrick McCain, Deputy Director, Department of Transportation. We stand on our testimony and support. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. We have Shannon Edie, President of the Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce.
Aloha and good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Mahalo for the opportunity to provide testimony on this matter. I'm Shannon Edie, and I'm co-owner of Holomua Consulting Group, which is a Native Hawaiian and women-owned small business. Today, however, I'm here in my role as president and to speak on behalf of the Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber stands in strong support of HB 1974. We submitted written testimony, but I also wanted to provide oral comments to reinforce how important this is to our chamber, to our members, and to the small business community at large. NHCC tracked and supported this initiative back in 2017, and we were disappointed when funding didn't come through, but we're encouraged to see this renewed effort. We agree that the state must create, develop, and implement strategies to ensure that all small businesses, including those owned by veterans, women, and Native Hawaiians, are able to effectively participate in small business contracting opportunities. Ultimately, what it comes down to is access. With respect to state procurement, our members and other local businesses have expressed challenges when it comes to learning about contracting opportunities, navigating what is often a complicated procurement process, and really just understanding how to do business with the state. And all of these things relate back to and present barriers to accessing state contracting opportunities. This bill would take critical first steps in establishing the necessary foundation to develop an effective small business program, which will work to address and minimize these barriers for small businesses. I think other states have successfully implemented similar small business programs, and we are confident that such a program here would be incredibly beneficial to the small business community. So with that, we stand on our written testimony and support, and again, urge the passage of HB 1974. Mahalo for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see, we have an individual, Gerald Gordner, written in support, and finally late testimony from Jay Kohio Lewis, the CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Written in support. That's all we have on 1974. Is there anybody else on Zoom who'd like to testify? Seeing none, members, questions? Nope. Okay, next one is 2072. First up is State Procurement Office.
Good morning, chairs, vice chair, members of the committee. The State Procurement Office stands on its written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Written with comments on the measure. We have Gerald Gordner, again, an individual. Written in support. And we do have late testimony from Daintree Bartolis, the Executive Administrator for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for our late testimony. Committee members, we are in strong support of House Bill 2072. We'd like to call out, highlight our third paragraph, where we support the changes on page 9, lines 10 and 12 through 16. The employee racial language is in Procurement Code 103D-1010 needs to be removed to be conform with the amendments made in section 103D-1001 by Act 55 from Session Laws of the Hawaii 2021 legislature. And this will be in the racial be in the correct alignment. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's see, I believe that is all we have on 2072. Anybody on Zoom wishing to testify? Seeing none, members, questions of the testifiers? Nope. Okay, thank you much. Next up, House Bill 2492, Ginny Wright, ACECH Director, American Council of Engineering Companies of Hawaii. Written in opposition, Ikaika Kincaid, Regional Director, Consor Engineers, LLC. Written in opposition, Reed Mizui, AIA Vice President. Written in opposition, Sandy Wong, individual.
I'm here, Chair. And I would also mention that Ikaika Kincaid hopped on too. Do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go ahead and
Ikaika
testify?
to-
Why don't you go ahead and testify and then we'll jump back to him, okay?
Okay, thank you. So my name is Sandy Wong. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am opposed to 2492. This is a recycled bill from last session. Last session, it wasn't ready for prime time, and with all due respect, I would say that it's not ready for prime time again. Unfortunately, this bill is a little bit too black and white. Basically, it says that whenever there's cost overruns, it's the fault of the design professional. And the story is much more complicated than that. And also, if there is negligence on the part of the design professional, there is mechanisms already where if there is a lawsuit against a design professional for negligence, they have to go to the design conciliation panel. But, when we did studies, and I think Day said this last session, when they did studies on cost overruns, it wasn't due to negligence of the design professional. There are many more components, but this bill would basically say whenever there was a cost overrun, it would be negligence on the part of the design professional. There would be no due process. Basically, the statute would just say, cost overruns, design professional's fault, which just isn't fair. And so we think this bill needs more work. And so we appreciate the intent of the introducer. I think, as a citizen of the state, I don't like cost overruns, but this bill is a little bit too simplistic. It basically says, cost overruns, it's the design professional's fault. And that is just too simplistic. So I would strongly suggest that you hold this bill, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And now I guess we'll go back to Ikaika.
Yes, good morning, chairs and committee members. Ikaika Kincaid here on behalf of American Council of Engineering Companies. I would like to kind of add on to what Sandy was saying, that this bill is definitely not worded appropriately, and definitely needs a lot more work. What I would like to kind of point out, which we also identified in our testimony, was that there are already appropriate provisions existing within the procurement code to address situations where the design professional could potentially be at fault. So those are already in there. And the other thing we wanted to kind of really point out is that, cost overruns, change orders, and stuff like that can be very complicated and a lot of times warranted or needed. And therefore, that can't necessarily be put on the designer. There's a lot of unknowns that happen, especially in geotechnical work, where we do our due diligence, but then you have an inadvertent situation where it was previously not known, and that's another concern for us, putting those costs associated with that cost overruns onto the designer. So I guess that's pretty much all we have at this point.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to defer to my vice chair to run the hearing. I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have anyone left to testify on 2492? Seeing no one, do we have members with questions?
Madam Chair.
From the DOT, Patrick McCain, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, we have submitted late testimony and we'd like to stand on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam
Members?
Chair, This is
Yes.
Bonnie with the State Procurement Office. We also
Absolutely.
submitted testimony and we stand
Go
on
ahead.
our written testimony.
Thank you so much. If no questions from other members, we'll move on to HB 2017. I'll make sure I'm in the right place. We have two testifiers, one in support, Bonnie Kahukui from the State Office of Procurement and the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations. Bonnie, would you like to testify on this measure?
Thank you. We stand on our written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members with questions for this measure? Thank you. Seeing none, moving on to HB 2183. A bill that amends the Hawaii revised statute to allow procurement of professional services where there are fewer than 3 qualified persons. We have testifiers in support from the University of Hawaii. Comments from Bonnie Kahakui from the State Procurement Office. Kurt Otaguro in support, Director of Accounting and General Services. Christine Kinimaka in support. Andrew Kawano in support. We have 7 people in opposition, including the Executive Director of the American Council of Engineering Companies. Is there anybody who would like to testify on this measure?
Yes, Vice Chair, this is Sandy Wong. I did submit testimony and I would like to submit oral testimony if I may.
Go right ahead, Sandy Wong, an individual in opposition.
Yes, so I am strongly opposed to this bill. Basically, I see it as an erosion of qualification-based selection. I don't know if all the committee members are aware, but design professional services are based not on low bid, high bid, it's based on qualification-based selection. So basically, the idea is that the state is getting the most qualified design professional to do the work. And I think that's what we really want. This qualification-based selection is a national standard to procure design services. We adopted it in Hawaii about 20 years. And when we adopted it in Hawaii about 20 years, there was a problem. There was lots of corruption, basically lots of agencies. Instead of giving it to the most qualified firm, we're giving jobs to their uncle, their cousin, their neighbor. And although this bill says it's an exception to do less than 3, we really see this as the slippery slope, that they're cracking the door open. And once this door is open, we're gonna start seeing more bills come up to try to do more exceptions to qualification-based selection. And so for that reason, I strongly oppose it, simply because I just don't think it's good for the state, nor is it good for our citizens, because I, as a citizen, when a design professional is doing a bridge, I don't want the cheapest guy. I don't want the guy who happens to be the uncle of the guy appointing the contract. I want the most qualified guy. So thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. Bonnie, would you like to testify with your amendments requests?
Yes, thank you. So my comments would just change as page 1, section 1, lines 5 to 10. If less than 3 qualified persons respond to a solicitation. So we are in agreement that we should get the most qualified persons. What we're having difficulty with, and our agencies are telling us, is sometimes maybe not necessarily design professionals, but other professions are not responding to the solicitations. So they're having to go out repeatedly, putting out a notice, hoping somebody will respond, or broadening the scope of work to the degree that it's actually diluted, which is what Sandy doesn't want, to get 3 people to just respond. So this bill would just allow agencies who have done their first attempt to get 3 quotes, and they've tried try maybe repeatedly. And if they fail to get that, come into their chief procurement officer and say, hey, I've tried this. Now we need an alternative means and we're asking for an exception. This is not a blanket exception for everybody or anybody. It's only under certain circumstances that they can't get the responses that the original bill calls for. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to testify? Go ahead, Department of Transportation, Patrick McCain.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. The Department of Transportation will stand on our testimony in support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is Ikaika Kincaid with ACEC. We would like to testify in opposition of this bill. As you well know, we have over 70 members in our affiliation with representing over 1,500 employees. The qualification-based selection procurement for design professionals is one of the main things that we want to ensure that is going to be upheld. And so we feel that there needs to be a little bit more collaboration on the language that is going to get put into this bill. And because of the gravity and importance of protecting that integrity of QBS, ACEC really requests this bill to be held until further conversation with all stakeholders can be hashed out and vet the potential negative consequences. Because of the short time frame, we were not able to get out to all of our members, especially those members who are involved with crafting that QBS language, years ago, and put their hard effort into instituting that language. We want to make sure that we can uphold their hard work and make sure that we run through certain scenarios to make sure that there are no loopholes that could potentially be exploited with changing this bill or changing these laws in the alternative procurement language. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom that would like to testify on HB 2183? Go right ahead, Ms. Ho.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. My name is Jamie Ho, and I'm representing John Govea today, who apologizes for not being able to attend. The University of Hawaii stands on its written testimony in support, and we do run into this situation on not specifically design professionals, but on other trades where we don't have 3 firms on our list. So we agree with Bonnie that it should be a process where we're not stuck in our procurement for any type of professional services, and not specifically design professions. It could be accounting, auditing, surveying, real estate appraisal, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair, may I make a comment? This is Sandy Wong again.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Listening to UH and the State Procurement Office, it doesn't seem that it's a problem for them to get 3 qualified firms for design professionals. So I would ask that if this bill is inclined to move this measure, that they make an exemption for design professionals. I think that may solve the problem.
Thank you very much. We are considering amendments, if I'm not mistaken. Do we have any members with questions?
Quick question, Vice Chair.
Go ahead. Thank you.
This one's for Ikaika. Ikaika, have you seen the testimony from State Procurement Office on their suggested amendment at all?
Yeah, we've already started working on crafting some of the language. But again, we wanted to make sure that we reach back out to our 70 or so firms. Some of those folks, like I mentioned, who are involved from the start on crafting the QBS language. So right now we're trying to get a meeting on Monday morning with our members to try and see what a lot of their concerns are. And we're just concerned that we just want to make sure that there's no loopholes or any other items that potentially could degrade the QBS process for design professionals. And we totally understand the less than 3 qualification. We understand that there are unique projects out there, specialized projects out there where a lot of local firms don't have that expertise, and we're aware of that. But we just want to make sure that we're going forward with the right verbiage to get put in this solicitate or this bill to make sure that it doesn't degrade that QBS process. That's
Okay,
my
well,
concern.
please
So-
share with them the state procurement office's suggested amendment, because I believe the verbiage and what they're trying to, propose as a workaround to your concerns is worth, their consideration. So hopefully you guys can look specifically at that one when you get together on Monday.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. Yeah. We're working hard to try and figure this one out.
Okay, but please have them look at that one, if you don't mind, okay?
Yes.
In addition to whatever you guys can come up with. Vice Chair, thank you.
Representative Mizuno, do you have a question?
No,
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Moving on, I guess, to 2455. Would you like me to-
Continue on, please.
Okay.
Yes.
2455, relating to Hawaii Correctional Industries. We have one testifier in opposition, Max Otani, the Director of Public Safety. Or is he here to testify on Zoom today?
Chair, yes, this is Maria Cook, Deputy Director for Administration. With me here is also the HCI Administrator. We strongly oppose this measure and ask that you hold this measure, primarily because HCI will have difficulty complying with this measure if they have to provide goods and or services that HCI produces or manufacture. HCI just does not have the funding to have the necessary infrastructure and equipment to be producing goods. If the legislature is inclined to pass this measure, we ask that they provide the necessary funding. If you have any questions, the HCI Administrator is here to be answering any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on Zoom who'd like to testify on HB 2455? Seeing none, do we have any members with questions about this measure for the Office of Public Safety? Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 2522 relating to the Board of Education and asking the Board of Education to hold 6 community forum meetings in all counties on an annual basis. We have 3 testifiers on that bill, with 2 with comments and 1 with support. Cheryl Karazu, the Park Director of Information. Cheryl Park, the Director of Office of Information Practices, with comments. Douglas Meller in support, and Grace Vizia with comments. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to testify in person today? Seeing none, we will move on to HB 2386 relating to elections. Is everybody getting online for the next bill or looking to testify for the previous bill? Okay, we're in 2386 relating to elections, to prepare a digital voters registration guide to be posted on the website. We have Scott Nago, the Chief Elections Officer, with comments. Craig Harai, Department of Budget and Finance, with comments. Reese Nakamura, Patricia O'Hara, Deputy Attorney Generals, with comments. Sandy Ma with Common Cause. Sandy, would you like to testify today?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Sandy Ma with Common Cause, and we are testifying in support of HB 2386. We provided some additional suggestions to improve this bill. We've said that voter information guide is crucial for an informed electorate. We've asked that the voter information guide be neutral and written in plain language. We don't understand why it's limited to 150 words for candidates. We don't think that would actually inform the public as to the candidates. It would maybe just confuse. And so we asked that it not be limited to 150 words. We also asked that the voter information guide not be distributed by one means only, which is electronically. We've noticed, especially during the pandemic, that a lot of people in Hawaii do not have access to broadband. So it's very important that the voter information guide be broadly distributed by as many means as possible and as many different locations as possible. And we've also asked that the voter information guide be translated into multiple languages and it be readily accessible to our disability community. Thank you very much for allowing Common Cause to testify in support of this measure, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ma. And I skipped over Scott Nago. Please proceed if you'd like to testify.
No, we're just done on our written testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Reese Nakamura, would you like to testify?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Reese Nakamura, Deputy Attorney General. The department has submitted its comments and we appreciate the committee's consideration of our comments. And I will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is James Gashel here to testify today? Yes, please proceed, James.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. James Gashel here testifying on behalf of the National Federation of the Blind of Hawaii. We're fully in support of this bill, but we emphasize 2 points around the idea of accessibility. Not everybody reads standard print. And so in our case, our members use screen reader technology. We want to be sure that the voter information guide, when posted in a digital format, is in at least one format that is screen reader accessible for people who are blind or visually impaired. That's the first point. The second point is that the bill calls for a notice about the digital information guide to be mailed with all printed ballots. And our amendment on this point asks that the notice also be emailed with anyone who has requested an alternate format electronic ballot, which is allowed by law as passed by the last session. So it should be emailed as well as mailed. And with that, I'm just going to say mahalo and thank you for addressing these concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Gashel. Do we have anyone else ready to testify on 2386 on Zoom? No? Then members, questions about 2386? Go right ahead, Chair.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. A couple actually. Let's go ahead first with the Office of Elections. Scott, if you're still around. He may not be. Okay.
Here he comes.
There he comes. You there?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, a question. This is actually very similar to a bill that Jay Ha heard the other day. And some of the concerns that came up there were obviously the first concern was that there's a lot of people in our rural areas that don't have access to internet. And as such, what would be your feedback on making digital and printed such a voter copy guide that would be disseminated generally?
So digital and printed versions, there are many bills that are being heard that are similar to this bill. This is the digital version. There is a printed version, it's just that the cost would be more. They're certainly doable. It's just the cost would be different between a digital version as well as a printed version.
Yeah, but if the resources were provided by the legislature, then you would have no problem in doing a printed version too, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think of our friends in Hana in particular, who are challenged geographically by broadband penetration in those areas. And the other thing too, I guess this is for Sandy, the 150 word limitation, if she's still there.
I am sorry.
Yeah,
On
no worries.
another meeting.
Yeah, you know, you're doing multiple. That's the cool thing on Zoom. You can be in several committee hearings at the same time. But I'll let you get back to the other one real quickly. The 150 word, it seems to me to try to provide a basically a level playing field. If you had no limitation, then there could be some candidates who could create voluminous types of statements that could generally predispose those candidates who have don't have that kind of lengthy, and could also create quite a cumbersome guide. I mean, can you respond to those observations?
Yes, thank you for that question, Chair. We're hoping that the Office of Elections would be the office that would create a neutral, impartial guide, even for candidates. We're concerned about candidates creating their own guides, because that would not be neutral, and it would lend to the appearance of the state possibly endorsing a particular candidate, especially if a candidate is particularly flowery about himself, herself, or themselves. And so it would seem like if the state or the Office of Elections could create a neutral, impartial candidate descriptor, it would be better.
Well,
that would be our recommendation.
I resemble that remark, but that being said, I think that there's a problem, an inherent problem in them editing. It could be perceived as being partial. I think the 150 word is a way to create a less flowery statement and to create some kind of a standard, a neutral standard in statute. Wouldn't you agree?
We think if it's the Office of Elections, coming out with a voter information guide, we think that's something that's preferable to somebody coming in saying vote for me because the other guy is a dirt bag or something.
Well, they do that anyway. I mean, that happens anyway. I mean, that's but I mean, clearly them preparing a guide, I think I want to just focus in on the word limitation. I think it creates a neutral standard so that you don't have some candidates who may be more able to wordsmith better and create more long detailed descriptions as opposed to those who don't. You see what I'm saying?
I do. I think 150. I mean, we would like an impartial, neutral voter guide. But if that's not something the committee finds reasonable, then we will continue to work on that.
Yeah, no, we clearly want a neutral one too, especially if the Office of Elections is preparing it. But I think I'm just trying to. I think I see it as a way to create neutrality between the candidates. That's all.
Yeah, so. I think I've tried to write something that's 150 words, and it just seemed awfully short. Maybe I'm too flowery.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Is Craig Harai here from Budget and Finance by any chance? I was a little confused about that testimony that talked about coronavirus relief and ESSER funding as their testimony.
Yeah, that's a common theme you're seeing in a lot of testimony from them. I brought that up in JHA too.
Didn't seem germane. All right. Also wanted to check with Office of Elections, Mr. Nago. Would it be possible, instead of spending the additional funds, to do an envelope stuffing with a notice about the existence of an online thing, to actually just print it on the back of the envelope to save money and time, and then use the electronic notification for people with disabilities? Would that suffice?
Certainly, but I just want to point out that our envelopes are already being currently printed for the 2022 election. So if we're going to do something like that, it would have to be for the 2024 election, because we're currently printing our envelopes due to supply
running out of
shortages.
time.
Yeah, or supply paper shortages. So we had to get a jump on it.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one bill left on this agenda, HB 1933, relating to people who work with children, establishing rules of ethics applicable to people who work with children. We have several testifiers, beginning with Robert Harris, the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Ethics Commission, with comments. We have Marilyn Yamamoto, with the Hawaii Family Advocacy Team in support. Raymond Kong, Legal Director of Hawaii Appleseed, requesting amendments. Catherine Jian in support. Will Caron in support. Milena McKee in support. Anika Aftab in support. Jacob Evans. Nonohe Botello. Jonathan Stremmel. Jennifer He, Sandy Navarez, and Kari Wee, all in support. Are any of these individuals here to testify on Zoom? I see Ms. Zayan. Can you proceed, please?
Yes, Vice Chair Wildberger and Chair McKelvey, thank you so much for hearing this measure. I stand on my testimony in strong support with amendments. I also, as one of the main advocates of this measure, agree with the Commission's recommendation for a small suggestion of change, and I'm available for any questions if need be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Botello?
Aloha, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Nonohe Botello, and I'm an independent consultant for victims and their surviving families of homicide and other violent crimes. I've also spent 30 years in the mental health professional, and I've seen a lot of cases and read through a lot of documents. I strongly support this bill because this is a bill that has teeth, in that it provides that the contractors of any person who violates the rules of ethics are voidable on behalf of the state. That's teeth, and that's accountability, and that's why I'm testifying. I've seen, I want to specifically talk about the fact-finding process conducted. You know, I've seen many fact-finding reports, and in the fact-finding reports I've looked at myself. Currently, I have 3 clients that I'm looking at. There are so many errors, false information, everything that you can, I've imagined. One report had 127 errors. And these are the fact-finding reports that are going to the family court and being presented. And I'm concerned because in the fact-finding process, yes, errors are made. I see it all the time. In one case, a young man was in the fact-finding report was reported to have been employed by the Honolulu Fire Department. And when we looked at the dates they had on the fact-finding report, that young man would have been 11 at the time. And so that was clearly an error, paragraphs and paragraphs worth of falsified information, misleading information on these documents. I have another one who the document said that the perpetrator of a sexual assault was somebody completely different from the person that was alleged. When we contacted the workers on this kit, they simply said it was a typo. This is not acceptable. They are presenting documents with misleading information into family court. That's a standing document. And they are helpless to do anything. A lot of times when these kids are being removed from their familiar homes, not through adoptive homes, from their familiar homes, these alleged perpetrators are getting falsely arrested with no warrants. They're coming in with no warrants. They're not given any charges, saying whatever the charges were to them, no reports, no nothing, and they're arrested. I recently had a young man who was arrested, accused of a sexual abuse, not on his child, on someone else, and they shackled him at the door with pink handcuffs, the color representing sexual assault perpetrators. They gave him pink booties on his feet to wear, and he was detained in the squad car for 2 hours prior to even charging him. They put on these pink colors on him to target him when he went in. This is unconstitutional. This violated every right that he has under the Constitution. Parents are being separated from their familial children, and they have no recourse but to wait it out, to see, contract providers say, well, if you do this and admit it, then you can get your kids back. What if it's a false allegation? What if there's falsehoods in that document and they will not admit to it? Their children are held longer and longer. And they've explained it to me like they feel like it's a death to them because they immediately cannot see their children, cannot talk to their children, don't even know where the children are sometimes. And they wait months months and years sometimes to have this resolved in family court based on fact-finding reports. So I'm very concerned. I like this bill because it does bring it some teeth to have somebody held accountable for these things, because these parents' rights are being violated. The children are not being protected, and these cases are being brought in front of the family court with misleading representations, errors, overt wrong information, or wrong about the wrong people. I just don't know how they can get away with it and how we can tolerate that. I think as the body that can decide this is a good bill. Yes, there might need to be some amendments, but this is something that you have to look at, because this is a violation of parental rights, violation of constitutional rights in every way. So I stand in strong support of this bill and hope to see this move through. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Botello. I think your examples are important context. Do we have anyone else that would like to testify on Zoom for this bill? If not, do we have any members with questions?
I have a question.
Thank you. Go right ahead, Representative Mizuno.
Thank you very much, Representative Wahlberger. No, great seeing you again. It's been awesome. It's been a few years, and you did such a great job working with us, the Attorney General's office, and the prosecutors to pass Joel's law. I'll never forget that. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for working so hard. And this was, I think, a labor of love that took about 3 or 4 years to pass it. And I still remember what you told the grandkids. This is the right way to do things. And so I just wanted to thank you. I like what you said about the bill. You're in strong support. Are there any amendments, any changes, any edits that you think should be put into this bill? Just your thoughts.
You know, it's a big bill, and it's a well-written bill. And I don't have any amendments, but I want to just stress that this fact-finding process has to be investigated. There needs to be another entity that looks at these fact-finding processes. Like I said, there are complete not errors, just overt information on some cases that didn't even belong to the defendant. And this bolsters the fact-finding report when they send it to the family court to say, hey, look at this person, this, and this, and it's all based on not factual basis. And I'm concerned about that because it ties the family's hands. And for a very long time, they have to jump through hoops to prove themselves innocent. I'm concerned that, the entities involved, they have the concept going into that you're guilty until proven innocent. And that's not correct. These families have to prove themselves innocent. They have to jump through every hoop. And if they don't, they're threatened. Okay, if you don't do this, then you're not going to get your child back. This has to stop, John. You know me. We work together, and it just is my concern because I have 3 active cases just like this, and the fact-finding reports are horrible, just horrible. So that's my thought. I don't have any real edits or amendments at this point, John, but we will continue. I'll continue to watch this bill.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Danohe, and please give my best to your family. Thank you very much for testifying today, and we'll do our best to craft the bill the right way. Thank you so much.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else left with questions from the committee? If not, we will recess for decision-making from our Tuesday committee hearings.
Okay. Thank you very much. Decision making. We're going to first start off with the bills that we heard on Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. hearing. First up is 1423 recommendations. Member is a House Draft 1. We'd like to blank out the $5,000 amount. We'd like to ask JHA to look at perhaps making it 10,000 or even higher, because these are super PACs that we're dealing with, and they have a lot of resources, particularly dark money resources at their availability, and as such, a $5,000 fine may be punitive. But that's something we'd like JHA to look at. So we're going to blank up the 5,000 and put the requested JHA in the committee report with an effective date of 21/12. May it live in infamy. Members, questions, comments, If not, Vice Chair 1423, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1423 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Cullen.
Aye.
Representative Eli. Excused. Representative Ichiyama.
Aye.
Representative Mizuno.
Aye.
Representative Woodson.
Aye.
Representative Yamashita.
Aye.
Representative Ward. Excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you so much, members. Next up, 1424, basically a housekeeping bill. We do have to do some tech amendments, though, to it, according to HMSO for style and et cetera, et cetera. So recommendation is a House Draft 1 with just the tech amendments. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1424 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. With excused Representatives Eli and Ward. Do any of the other members have reservations or no votes? Thank you, Chair. Your measure recommendation is adopted.
Thank you so much. 1425. This actually amends a chapter that is being amended in another bill, which is 1888. And rather than having them both continue on and perhaps at the very end conflict with each other insofar as the changes being made, we're going to defer this measure with the intent of melding it into House Bill 1888 to create uniformity. Next up, House Bill 1568. After talking to the author about it, what we're going to do is he'd like to keep the purpose section, which we're amending in the pre-existing law, just so it's clear to the Senate and the public what the intent is being done. We're going to add some language to basically make it clear that this does not exclude student meals that are purchased in bulk or offered in bulk, by the university or Department of Education. And then we're going to add the Department of Defense, as was testified at the hearing, into the measure, because although they do have quite a substantial number of purchases that are local foods, it'd be great to get their metrics and to have them included, given that they spend about 600 and something thousand per year on food purchases. And an effective date of 21/12 for further conversation. Members, questions? Comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1568, House Draft 1.
Your recommendation to pass HB 1568 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Noticing, acknowledging excused absences for Eli and
Eli,
Ward.
I'm
here.
I'm here.
Welcome. Apologies, Representative Eli. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Do we have Representative Eli?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Any other no or reservation votes? Thank you, Chair. This measures that your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, everybody. House Bill 1673, despite the testimony of Dobor that this was to cure a problem of not having any available vendors, and that this is an alternate form of procurement, this pretty much exempts all parking lots and all parking on all state facilities completely from the concessions law. And as such, we don't think that's a great idea. And so there's a Senate vehicle, I believe, on this as well. Given all that, we're going to defer 1673. House Bill 1794 went ahead and talked to the author about the bill and the chair of the next committee that will be hearing it. All the testimony was in opposition. However, the one testifier said that if a working group were to be constructed, they would be okay with us moving the measure forward so that the health committee can look at it and address the issue. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert a working group into the measure. We're going to go ahead and post-implement the purchasing requirements 1 year. So the working group has to come up with recommendations that the legislature can enact. Otherwise, this form of purchasing would take effect a year later, and an effective date of 21/12 for further conversations for the public and the other committees. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1794, House Draft 1.
Thank you. Your recommendation to pass HB 1794 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, with Representative Ward excused. Do any other members have reservations or no votes?
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 1830, if it walks like a captive and quacks like a captive, maybe it's a captive. That being said, I totally am supportive of this idea. I think we need to keep our state resources internal. Buy local goes beyond many things. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an effective date of 21/12, and in the committee report, we're going to have the Committee on Finance, should they choose to hear this measure, look at funding this special fund or putting the resources in the special fund of at least $322 million. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1830, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1830 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, with Representative Ward excused. Do any other members have reservations or no votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, next up, we're going to have House Bill 1849. There's a Senate bill that has fewer committees to go through. So that being said, we're going to defer this indefinitely. Next up, House Bill 1881, as was testified by campaign spending. And we concur, we agree with the intent of this bill. However, the wholesale insertion of model act language into that chapter of the HRS could cause mechanical and execution problems for campaign spending. They would like to work with us in the next committees on the measure insofar as amending the existing statute. And we'd like to give them the time to do so. So that being said, we'll note the concerns in the committee report and put a effective date of 21/12 in the measure for further conversation. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1881, House Draft 1.
Your recommendation, Chair, HB 1881 to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Ward excused. Any other members with no or reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. 1888 recommendation is a House Draft 1. We're going to meld, I should say, the language of 1425 into 1888 as it does not conflict with 1888. What we're also going to do is harmonize the definition of electioneering communication with the exception to make sure that newspapers or online publications are included, which they're not right now in the exception. We're going to have a effective date of 21/12 for further conversations on that for the next committees. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1888, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1888 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Ward excused. Do any other members have reservations or no votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 1908, we're going to defer time certain. We want to address the issues that were raised in testimony between the glaziers, the subs and the generals, and the procurement office. Next up, House Bill 1974, recommendation is a House Draft 1. We're going to go ahead and keep the appropriation amounts blank, a effective date of 21/12. But in the committee report, we're going to ask the Committee on Finance, should they choose to hear this measure, to look at funding $115,000 out of the general funds, $100 for the program itself, $126,000 in FTE1 for the position and the program cost for SBO. And then at the $125,000, which was requested per year for fiscal year 2022. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1974, House Draft 1.
Mahalo, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1974 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Ward excused. Any other members with no or reservation votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. House Bill 2072, there is a Senate vehicle that is moving and is further along. So given that, we're going to defer this one indefinitely. House Bill 2492, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this a little closer, defer time certain on this. And that will be next week, Wednesday, when we'll be bringing this measure back for decision making. Same with House Bill 2071, defer time certain to next Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., 309. We're going to do the same with House Bill 2183. We want the design professionals to look at SBO's recommended amendments and also see if they can come up with one of their own that would address their concerns. But again, we want them to really look at SBO's amendments because we think it solves their concerns. Next up, House Bill 2455. While we appreciate the intent of the measure, given the testimony in opposition with the problems it could concern in execution, we're going to defer this indefinitely. House Bill 2252, we're going to defer time certain next Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., room 309. House Bill 2386, we're also going to defer time certain next Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., room 309, so we can work on addressing the issues of people who don't have broadband access, as well as the testimony of the blind, disabled community, or the vision impaired community, I should say, and to look at the 150-word limitation discussion that came up. Finally, House Bill 1933, recommendation is a House Draft 1. We're going to insert a effective date of 21/12, which for the public's edification is merely a date in the future, so further discussion can take place. It's not when we intend the law to take effect. We're going to put the amendments suggested by the Ethics Commission in regards to Chapter 84. We're going to also adopt the multiple amendments that were offered by the Appleseed Coalition. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to name it Calvin's Law as requested by one of the testifiers as a way to honor the memory of the person. Members, are there any questions or comments on 1933? If not, Vice Chair, 1933 House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1933 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Ward is excused. Any other members with reservations or no votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you so much, members. We appreciate you being here and your support. We'll see you next week.